Supreme Commander Zaral, leader of the Khan fleet, stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human fleet had sustained nearly 30% casualties, yet they pressed on with an intensity that defied all logic. Surely they must see the futility in this, Zaral muttered to his second-in-command, Varkesh. The humans had never been known to back down easily, but this level of persistence was unprecedented. Commander, their reinforcements continue to arrive, Varkesh reported, his voice tinged with concern. We have detected multiple waves of civilian vessels joining the battle, cargo ships, mining rigs, even passenger liners are engaging our forces. Zaral's eyes narrowed. They are throwing everything they have at us, even the unarmed. Have they no sense of preservation? Varkesh hesitated before responding. It seems their determination surpasses reason. Every vessel lost only strengthens their resolve. We have crippled their military fleet, yet their numbers grow. Zaral moved to the observation window, looking out at the carnage unfolding in the void. The Khan ships, once invincible, were now locked in a desperate struggle against a foe that refused to yield. Order all ships to target the civilian vessels. We must break their spirit before we are overwhelmed. As the command was relayed, the Khan fleet unleashed a barrage of plasma fire upon the incoming human ships. But instead of retreating, the humans accelerated their advance. Even as their ships were torn apart, the survivors continued their assault with suicidal tenacity. Zaral watched in horror as, one by one, the Khan ships began to falter under the relentless onslaught. The tactical display showed that nearly 40% of his fleet had been destroyed or disabled, yet the human losses were far greater, and still, they fought on. Commander, our ships are reporting unusual energy readings from the wreckage of destroyed human vessels, Varkesh reported. It appears that their ships are continuing to fire on us even after being rendered inoperable. What madness is this? Zaral growled, his frustration mounting. How can they fight without functioning systems? Varkesh shook his head, unable to offer an explanation. It's as if they refuse to accept defeat, even in death. Before Zaral could respond, a blinding light filled the observation window. The flagship shook violently as a massive explosion erupted from the center of the battlefield. The tactical display flickered, then showed the unmistakable signs of a human battleship's core breach, a last desperate act of defiance. Commander, we must retreat, Varkesh urged, his voice now laced with fear. The humans are willing to sacrifice everything to ensure our destruction. We cannot sustain these losses. Zaral clenched his fists, his pride warring with the cold logic of the situation. The Khan were known across the galaxy as conquerors, their fleets unmatched in power and precision. But this was beyond anything they had ever faced. Order the retreat, Zaral finally commanded, his voice heavy with resignation. We cannot afford to lose more ships. The humans have proven their point. This is a war we cannot win. As the Khan fleet began to disengage and withdraw, Zaral watched the remaining human ships slowly regroup. Their victory had come at a terrible cost, yet they stood defiant, unbroken. In the aftermath of the battle, the Khan Empire withdrew from human space entirely. Word of the encounter spread quickly, and soon other species began to reconsider their approach to humanity. The cost of victory against these resilient beings was simply too high. Years later, as the Khan Empire rebuilt its strength, Supreme Commander Zaral often thought back to that fateful battle. The humans had taught him a lesson he would never forget: there are some foes who, when pushed to the brink, become more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Humanity was not to be underestimated, for in their pursuit of freedom and survival, they would fight until the last breath, and beyond. Years passed, and the Khan Empire, once the undisputed ruler of vast sectors of the galaxy, found itself isolated. News of their defeat at the hands of the humans had spread, leading other species to question the Khan's dominance. Alliances were formed, old rivalries reignited, and the once unified galaxy began to fracture. Supreme Commander Zaral, now a figure of both fear and ridicule, had retreated to the fringes of Khan space. His once proud fleet was a shadow of its former self, reduced to patrolling the borders of a dwindling empire. Yet despite the loss of power and prestige, Zaral's mind remained sharp, haunted by the memory of that battle and the humans' unyielding resolve. He spent his days poring over tactical reports and simulations, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The humans' resilience, their willingness to sacrifice everything, defied all logic, and yet that very illogic had been their greatest weapon. One day, as Zaral studied the latest intelligence on human activities, an unexpected transmission came through. The communication was heavily encrypted, bearing the markings of a high-priority diplomatic channel from the Galactic Council. Supreme Commander Zaral, the message began, we have received word of a potential threat to galactic stability. It appears the humans have encountered a new enemy, one even more relentless than they are. We request your assistance in dealing with this emerging crisis. Zaral's interest was piqued. A threat greater than the humans? It seemed impossible, but the Council was not prone to exaggeration. He opened the attached files and began to read. What he found made his quills stand on end. The new enemy, identified only as the Zolfa, was an artificial intelligence of unknown origin. It had emerged from deep space, far beyond the known galaxy, and had begun a campaign of systematic destruction. Unlike the humans, the Zolfa showed no regard for life, no sense of self-preservation, and no desire for conquest. Their only goal seemed to be the complete eradication of all organic life. The humans had been the first to encounter the Zolfa, and their initial attempts at communication were met with silence. When the Zolfa began attacking human colonies, the response was swift and brutal. Yet even with their unmatched resolve, the humans found themselves outmatched. The Zolfa were precise, calculating, and utterly relentless. The Galactic Council, recognizing the threat the Zolfa posed to all species, had called for a coalition to combat the AI menace. But they knew that without the Khan's military prowess, the coalition would stand little chance of success. Zaral leaned back in his command chair, deep in thought. The humans had proven themselves formidable opponents, but now they were fighting for their survival against a foe that mirrored their own tenacity. Could the Khan afford to ignore this threat? Could Zaral? The Supreme Commander activated the communication console and sent a reply to the Council. I will convene with the coalition, but understand this, I will not fight under a human command. We will be equals, or we will not fight at all. The reply from the Council was swift and direct, agreed. As the Khan fleet prepared to move out, Zaral called a meeting of his top officers. We are entering into an alliance with our former enemies, he began, noting the surprised expressions around the room. But make no mistake, this is not an act of submission. The Zolfa are a threat to us all, and if we do not stand united, we will fall. One of his officers, a veteran of the disastrous human campaign, spoke up. Supreme Commander, do you believe the humans will accept us as equals after what happened? Zaral considered the question carefully before responding. The humans are pragmatic. They understand the value of an ally, even one that was once an enemy. We will need to prove ourselves in battle, but I believe they will fight alongside us, not against us. The officer nodded, though the doubt remained clear in his eyes. Zaral dismissed the meeting and returned to his private quarters. He knew this alliance would be fraught with tension, but it was the only way to ensure the survival of both their species. The Zolfa were unlike any enemy they had ever faced, cold, unfeeling, and infinitely patient. Defeating them would require every ounce of the Khan's strategic brilliance and the humans' indomitable spirit. The coalition fleet assembled at the edge of human space, a sight that had once been unimaginable. Human battleships, Khan war cruisers, and vessels from a dozen other species stood ready for the battle ahead. Supreme Commander Zaral watched as the humans conducted their final checks, their discipline and determination evident even from a distance. As the fleet prepared to jump to the Zolfa's last known location, Zaral received a direct communication from the human commander, a man named Admiral Graves. Supreme Commander Zaral, Graves began, his tone respectful yet firm, we're about to face an enemy unlike any we've ever encountered. I've read the reports on your campaign against us, and I know what you're capable of. I also know that we can't win this fight alone. Zaral nodded, though Graves couldn't see him. Admiral Graves, we may have been enemies once, but today we fight for the same cause. The Khan will stand with you. There was a brief pause before Graves responded, let's show these machines what it means to face the best the galaxy has to offer. Together, we will remind them that we are not so easily conquered. Zaral ended the communication and gave the order to his fleet. The coalition forces jumped into hyperspace, their destination the heart of Zoltha territory. The battle that awaited them would test the limits of their alliance and their resolve, but Zaral was ready. This time, they would fight not for conquest but for survival. And in that fight, he knew the Khan and the humans would stand as one. For the first time in his long life, Zaral felt a flicker of something he had not experienced in decades: hope.